Hello everybody, welcome back to this tropical update number 19 on Tropical Storm Elsa. Yes, now a tropical storm, winds now below 50 knots, but probably won't stay that way for very long. As we can see here, the satellite image, Elsa, about halfway through its journey through Cuba. Yes, the center of the storm is over Cuba, despite all that convection down there to the south. Convection remains displaced to the east side. We also see lots of convection firing along South Florida. That's the outer bands of Elsa moving over the area. Funnel clouds and strong winds have been reported throughout southern Florida. Tropical storm warning remains in effect for much of eastern Cuba and the Florida Keys from Dry Tortugas to Craig Key, as well as from Flamingo in South Florida northward to the Ochlockonee River. We'll also have a tropical storm watch from the same river across the panhandle to Indian Pass. The tropical storm watch from Craig Key to, I forget exactly, Ocean Reef and Florida Bay has been discontinued. Elsa has made its landfall on Cuba, continuing to weaken slightly, but it probably won't weaken much more before it exits and strengthens at least somewhat in the Gulf. We'll talk more about that when we take a look at the models. Sorry for the pictures being off-center there. Here's the latest radar from Key West. We can see the storm over Cuba, as we've said, and lots of rain with the storm at the moment. And the center seems pretty well defined, at least on radar, so that's good news. Again, no new hurricane hunters as the storm is inland at the moment. However, we will have a hurricane hunter as soon as the storm exits Cuba. The Air Force is going to be there to intercept the center to gain us more information on the storm. In the next 3 days, of course, there's going to be tropical storm force winds throughout much of the southeastern United States, especially Florida, as Elsa makes its way up the coastline. We see good potential throughout the area. As early as Tuesday morning in South Florida and the Keys, later Tuesday afternoon for about the southern half of the Florida Peninsula. Then by the time we get to Wednesday morning, almost all of Florida, aside from maybe part of the panhandle, will be seeing tropical storm force winds. There's a look at your watches and warnings, but those aren't all the watches and warnings. We also have rain being a threat, and therefore flood watches are also in effect for many areas. We're looking at 3 to 5 inches, isolated to 8 for the Florida Keys and the west coast of Florida. We're seeing 2 to 4, isolated to 6 for the remainder of Florida, that is the west coast and parts of the Panhandle, as well as southeastern Georgia and coastal South Carolina. Kind of all those areas in yellow on there. And then 1 to 3 inches, isolated to 5 for coastal North Carolina and southeastern Virginia. So lots of rain coming with this storm. The other water impact is, of course, storm surge and those with thunderstorms in the outer bands. So let's talk about those thunderstorms in the outer bands. Again, I mentioned there has been severe wind and tornadoes, or at least funnel clouds, today in southern Florida. That remains at a 2% risk today, up to 5% tomorrow, and cutting across most of the peninsula. We'll continue to monitor that as the risk remains decently high. It's probably a few scattered tornadoes in Florida is the best guess for tomorrow. Storm surge, of course, one of the biggest factors in hurricanes. We do have storm surge warnings now in effect from the Aucilla River down south to Bonita Beach. 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, including the Tampa Bay area, 2 to 4 feet further south from Inglewood to Bonita Beach. Both of those stretches have storm surge warnings. A storm surge watch from the Aucilla River to Ochlockonee, as well as southern Cuba. I have no clue if I keep on saying that name correct or not. We also have 1 to 3 feet from Flamingo, Florida, up to Bonita Beach. And we're looking at 1 to 2 feet from much of the Florida Keys, as well as parts of the Big Bend. So overall, a decent amount of storm surge for what's just a tropical storm, as they say. But we could potentially see some strengthening with this. We see many models taking this to around 60 knots or so by the time this storm makes landfall in about 2 days from now. So when we'll have landfall in the Big Bend area. It's going to remain inland across the southeastern United States, get near water for about a day or so. That'll bring it back down to a depression, probably a day and a half. and then make it back out over water. Maybe come back to a tropical storm real quick before becoming an extratropical cyclone. Once again, looking at a few more models, we do see some decent strengthening with this storm before it makes landfall, or at least some strengthening with this storm is possible. So that's something we're going to keep an eye on. Again, the European model getting really on board with some significant strengthening, at least up to a severe tropical storm again, potentially exceeding the 64 knot threshold or 63 knot threshold, or whatever the knot equivalent of 74 miles an hour is, for Elsa to become a hurricane again. A hurricane is not out of the question, and I would not be surprised if hurricane watches are issued for parts of the Big Bend north of Tampa, all the way to Indian Pass in the coming day or so, if the signal from the European continues. Let's take a look at the European. Speaking of that, we see a very strong storm. It strengthens very quickly heading into the Big Bend. The downside to the European is we only get a new picture frame every day, at least I do, because I'm not paying to get in the model. But we do see what becomes a relatively strong Elsa making its way into the Big Bend. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. The H-Wharf doing much the same thing. Elsa becoming very disorganized over Cuba, but getting itself together, becoming very strong. That dark red we saw on both those models is a severe tropical storm equivalent, 50 knots or greater. That is, of course, gale force or greater. So lots of things could go right or wrong, depending on how you look at it, for Elsa to continue. Regardless, it's going to be limited at least somewhat by some shear over the system, so it's not going to completely blow up over the Gulf. At least we don't think. So again, that's what we have on Elsa right now. There's another look at your watch warnings and cones. Remember, those impacts far outside of the cone, hence those tropical storm warnings for areas in southwestern Florida and much of western Florida. Despite them not being in the cone, we will see lots of wind and rain, potentially even tornadoes, storm surge, all for those areas as well. We'll have another update out tomorrow morning on Tropical Storm Elsa. We'll see how it's going. We'll be also continuing to monitor Elsa throughout the night. If anything major changes, I'll be sure to let you guys know. That's all for now. Chris Sixton for Weather Catholic Media.